You're probably right about that. Let me take a second here to throw some advertisements. If you like coffee, go to Old Man Coffee Shop and get you some coffee. You can also get you a tumbler. These are made by A&K Engravers. So go ahead and get you some of those. And we got some t-shirts. So go in there and check it out. Also, if you haven't at this time, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for you so you have all the notifications. And also on this show, uh, I'm going to have a link to um, Horns Horn Takes podcast on YouTube and his TikTok channel also, so you can follow Sean on both of those. So moving on, let's move on to basketball. Okay, do you think do you think OU and Texas are ready for the SEC in basketball? Personally, I think, I mean, some people argue this, but I think they're probably going to be a little bit easier basketball wise going to the SEC. I know Alabama was really good this year. Kentucky's had some really good years, but they've been kind of down the last 4 or 5 years. Florida at one time had some really good years, but they haven't been the same in a long time. Um, I don't know. Maybe I'm missing a team or two that's pretty good, but unlike the Big 12, where Kansas is good every year, Baylor's won a championship. Texas Tech played for a national championship. Texas, your Longhorns let me down. They busted my bracket yesterday, man. But I had them pick to win it all, and they had the team to do it. I didn't get to watch the game, so I don't know what happened. But yeah, the really good basketball. I mean, Oklahoma was last in the Big 12, and they beat Alabama this year. They played Texas twice to 3-point games, right? They played Kansas at their place they lost by 5, but had them down 10 with 5 minutes to go and choked it off. So every team in the Big 12 is good, really good. SEC, that's not the case. I mean, yeah, there's more teams, but there's not 10 really good teams in the SEC. Auburn's another good team that's really good, but there's probably about 4 or 5 really good teams, in my opinion, in the SEC. After that, it's just average basketball. So I think OU and Texas will have a lot easier schedule in basketball wise. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll if you guys check out the podcast tomorrow, I'll be talking about that Texas game against Miami. So you'll know exactly what happened if you check out the podcast. But
I'll
yeah,
do
as
it.
far as SEC scheduling, I think that you're right. I think the Big 12 has been generally accepted as the deepest basketball conference for a few years now in the NCAA. As you mentioned, a lot of teams have gone really deep in the tournament from the Big 12. So I think, at the worst, moving over to the SEC in basketball is like a lateral move, but it's probably more likely that the schedule will be a tiny bit easier on Texas and moving into the SEC. I think I think what's interesting about the SEC is there's a lot of talent in the SEC, even even in basketball and even on some of those teams that aren't as good. So you never know what's going to happen. I think the SEC is probably the second best conference, just because so many of the teams are so dangerous. It doesn't always show through in their record, but they're really talented. You get them in a tournament type scenario where, and the NCAA tournament, you look at teams throughout the year and you go, these teams should go win, and they do the whole seeding thing. This has been the absolute craziest year NCAA tournament. Not a single one or two is going to the Final Four, which I don't think that's ever happened before, actually.
Or three, or three seed. There's not three seeds.
Right. So that's definitely not happened. It's all about getting hot at the right times, kind of like the baseball postseason in college. There's teams all year long that, what was it, a couple years ago? Arkansas was the number one team in the country. They beat the brakes off of everybody in a really tough baseball conference, and they didn't even make it out of their own regional. I think they lost their regional. They either lost in the regional or lost in the super regional. So the number one seed in the tournament was out almost immediately. Didn't even make it to Omaha. And then you got, last year, Ole Miss is a
Mm-hmm.
team that they were good, obviously, but nobody was talking about Ole Miss to go win a national championship in baseball. They went and won a national championship in baseball. So with these tournaments, you just never really know. But I think, basketball wise, I think Oklahoma and Texas will be fine in the SEC. They'll definitely raise the dangerousness of the SEC in terms of a basketball conference.
Definitely, definitely. So at this time, I'm going to ask the viewers, if you're watching this, what are your thoughts on OU and Texas moving to the SEC? Do you think that they will be able to compete in all sports? But mostly we talk about football. But do you think they'll be able to compete, or do you think it's a dumb move and they should just stay where they're at in the Big 12? So you mentioned baseball. Let's go and move on to men's baseball. Um, and I definitely think the OU, well, see, OU in Texas, or Texas primarily, has been a dominant force in the Big 12 when it comes to baseball. There's been some other good teams at times. Oklahoma State, last couple years, been pretty good. Oklahoma had a run last year, and they have won a World Series a couple times, but they're not consistent. They're not consistently at the top. They'll have a really good year, and then 5 or 6 really bad years. So Texas, I think, will be able to compete, even though the SEC is really good, probably the best conference in baseball, and has been for a while. That I think Texas will be able to compete right away. OU, on the other hand, they're going to have to get them transfer portals. Get in, dig deep in that, and use the NIL. I think, to be able to compete. Otherwise, after this year, their chances of probably even making the postseason it's going to be really, really tough for them. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think the SEC is the best conference in baseball, without a doubt, hands down. It's not even close. Used to kind of be the Big 12. You had Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Baylor. Baylor used to be pretty good in baseball back in the early to mid 2000s. Texas Tech has been kind of one of those teams for a long time. There's been some years where Tech's been the number one team in the country starting out the season, and they've Tech's kind of been disappointing from a postseason perspective, but always had pretty good teams, and especially ever since Tadlock got there, ball a ton. So I think the SEC for Texas is still going to be tough, but I think Texas is in a much better position moving into the SEC from a baseball perspective than Oklahoma is. Like you said, Oklahoma had that kind of crazy wild last year where they didn't honestly do a whole lot during the regular season, and they got in the tournament, the Big 12 tournament, and got hot, won that thing, and then they just kept going and carried that right on into to a final berth in the College World Series. So the interesting thing and I'm going to do a show about this next week as well, and it's going to be more geared towards football. But the interesting thing about all of this move to the SEC is I wonder what Texas and Oklahoma see from a recruiting jump by just now actually being in the SEC. All these other schools could always say, like Texas A&M, for example, when they jump to the SEC, they could always this recruits. Yeah, man, we get to play in the SEC, and Texas doesn't, and Oklahoma doesn't. And that was kind of a thing they had in their back pocket. They could tell all these players, you're going to get to go play in Alabama. You're going to go play in Auburn and Florida and Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina in baseball. So they don't have that anymore. And now Texas and Oklahoma are moving into that conference. They're going to have the ability to tell that same story. And I wonder from you look at Texas and Oklahoma's athletic programs, and they have not been great lately. They've been good, and in their own specific areas good. Not so much in football for Texas lately, but baseball, basketball, they've been good. What happens when they go in and they can start cherry picking guys that would normally never think about going to Texas, never think about going to Oklahoma? It's going to kind of dilute the talent, I think, across the SEC, and it'll take time. It's not going to be like a thing that happens immediately. And I think Oklahoma and Texas are going to need to go in and have some early success to really accelerate it. But there's an opportunity for a lot of these kids that staying in these SEC schools that now may say, man, I want to go check out Austin, Texas. I want to go be in Austin for 4 years. So obviously we don't know what'll happen, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for both of those schools to go in and do better than a lot of people think they can do. Actually,